And we have a mushers lineup that is hotter than the sun this morning, and that's not hard to pull off. Still to come, the last great race on earth. Christian.
Yeah, when we were kids, we had some neighbors. When we were growing up, we were like 5, 6, 7, and 8. Some of the neighbors had sled dogs, and they were used for hauling firewood in and checking trap lines and stuff, so we got to go ride along with them once in a while. And that was pretty fun. I got a dog at the pound, a lead dog, and then I got some free dogs I traded something for. And then when I got my first Iditarod dog, I had an old beat-up wooden fishing skiff, an old wooden dory. A friend of mine had 3 puppies that are really superior breeding, so he wanted about 200 apiece for them, and I wanted about 600 for the boat, so we made a big swap. That was in 1979, and then in 1982 I ran those 3 dogs in my first Iditarod in 82.
Did you know you wanted to be a racer when you were a kid?
No, I knew I wanted to have sled dogs and maybe do trap lines, which I did for a couple years. But the Iditarod, I knew that once it started in 73 that if I could ever afford it, I'd want to do it.
You had some health issues going into your first Iditarod?
Yeah, I had a ruptured appendix on January 12th of 82, and then did the race on March 6th, about 2 months later. And it was a pretty serious deal, very serious, and I was in the hospital for a week, and then different antibiotics, and I couldn't even run the sled. I went from like 175 down to about 136, my weight did. I was just emaciated. There was so much infection in the stomach from earlier. Every time my stomach had hit the handlebars, it felt like hot knives going in there. It was just excruciating pain. During the early part of the race, I was trying to run about a 6.5 hour on, maybe 7 hours on, and then a 5-hour rest, maybe a 7 and 5 schedule, where most of the big guys were running about 6 and 6, running 6 and resting 6, and to be able to be anywhere near them. And I still was quite a ways away until I got to the burn area. That was between Roan and Nikolai, and I came around the corner in the burn area, and I saw the leader sitting there right in the trail having a little break, and I was very surprised that I caught up to him. I figured, oh, this isn't so bad. These guys aren't that tough, that I had a chance to beat them. And I did get into one checkpoint in first place, which is Galena, because I left Ruby fairly early, and then I got to Galena in first place, which was pretty unheard of for a rookie back then. And then I left Galena when it was 50 below. 45 below in town and probably 5 degrees colder down in the river, maybe 55 below, and just brutal. And I went out about maybe 20, 30 miles, and the trail wasn't marked very good back then, so I wasn't sure if I was even on the right trail. And I was concerned about that, so I didn't want to go back, so I stopped and I found an old cottonwood root ball in the middle of the Yukon River, and I had a gallon of Blazo with me that I'd gotten at the checkpoint. Poured about half of that on the root ball that was huge, and started this monstrous fire that burnt for 3 more days. And every musher that came, I used it to warm up a little bit. And then I got to White Mountain, and back then it was a 4-hour mandatory rest instead of 8. So there was maybe 7 or 8 or 9 of us in there, and I was the lead rookie, and there were some rookies coming behind me a few hours, and I wanted to get Rookie of the Year at least. I knew I couldn't win it, but I wanted to get Rookie of the Year, so I decided to sneak out of there into the storm, which I did, and it really pissed off some of the big mushers, because they knew that there was a chance. I was slower, but there was a chance I could get through the storm, and so they all followed me out an hour later. Pretty soon they all passed me, so I'm all by myself, and then going up Topcock Mountain. Got to the top and then got off the trail, got back on the trail. It was marked poorly and kept getting off the trail. Pretty soon I can't find the trail. I'm pretty screwed. So shut the team down. Dogs are all laid out nicely, and I didn't know which way it was. So foolishly I left the sled and the team looking for the trail. Well, I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find the dogs either. And I figured I'm pretty well done here. It was very cold, blowing about 50 or 60, drifting. So I stopped and figured, well, I better figure this out. So I started walking in tight circles, getting larger every time, just getting a little bit bigger, just beyond my tracks from before. And pretty soon I tripped over the gangline, not even knowing the dogs were there. They had been covered up with snow by now. So that was my lifeline. I made my way back to the sled, and then tipped the sled over, got in my sleeping bag, and then had a thermos full of hot chocolate and some cashew nuts, and took all that, and I waited for about 4 hours, 5 hours till daylight, and then yeah, woke up in the morning, the wind had quit, and I looked at the markers about 100 yards away, right there. But I'd lost several positions, I ended up coming in 13th. Well, I really wanted to win the race, and it was a financial hardship to do it, and I figured the dogs would be 4.5 instead of 3.5, some of them, but I figured I'd wait one more year until the main group was 5 years old, and I would add some new ones to it, so I figured I couldn't win it that year. I came back in 84. Probably the warmest year on record. There was lots of overflow and standing water on some of the lakes in the Farewell Burn area. There was probably water that deep in some places, right up to my knees. It was pretty scary because the smaller dogs were swimming actually a little bit. After going across several lakes, we finally got to a little bit of high country, which was about maybe halfway to the next checkpoint. So we stopped and built the fire and dried our clothing off and then continued on. It was at 84, and that whole race was pretty warm. And I think that favored my team because from the peninsula, the warm weather didn't slow us down as much as it did the interior teams.
Did you know you were in the lead?
Oh yeah, you could tell. I'd say after the town of McGrath, I'd taken my layover at Roan River, and a friend of mine, Rick Swenson, had spent about, usually if you stay more than 6 hours, you're pretty committed. You take your layover 6 to 8 hours. Well, he stayed there 11 hours, and he decided to go on to the next checkpoint or two to take a layover. And his reasoning was that it was really warm, and if it froze up like the prediction, the trail would be icy and crusty and hard on the dog's feet. So he took off by himself, and then 4 or 5 of the other mushers just sat around thinking about, well, this is a mistake. We shouldn't chase him out of here. But he's won the thing 3 times. I think he won it 4 times by then. So they all pulled a hook, and within a couple hours after he left, there was 6 or 7 or 8 of them taking off out of there. And so just myself and Joe Garney of the group I ended up traveling with, we were just shaking our heads. We couldn't believe it that they all wasted so much time that didn't count before their 24th. So they all went on to McGrath, and then by the time we got to McGrath, when we left there, they still were taking 7 or 8 hours left on their layover, so we had a hell of a lead right there. And I never really saw those guys again after that. So I traveled with Joe Garney for a few days, and then he was a little faster at nighttime. I was a little faster in the heat of the day. But I left him probably at the checkpoint of Galena. It was the heat of the day, and we took off, and he was ahead. And I got ahead, and I told him I'm going to stop and snack my dog, so I stopped and started getting all my pans out, and he did the same thing, and he started getting all ready, and I threw my stuff on my sled and took off, just got out of there, and he's shaking his head. And by the time he got his dogs fed, and it was too late, I'd gotten a 10-minute lead on him, and he'd never saw my team again the rest of the race. And I continued on to the town of Safety, and then my son had gotten out there with an airplane with a friend of his, and they met me, and I had a little bowl of soup there, and he said, well, you better get going, they're gaining on you. That's why I got a pretty good lead, and I said, no, they're not 4 hours behind you anymore, they're only about 3 hours behind you. So I took off, and I got lost 2 times coming into Nome. I lost a little bit of time, so luckily I had a big lead. I won by, I think, 1 hour and 39 minutes. It was 12 days and 15 hours, the whole thing. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And then got there at midnight and didn't go to sleep till 6 in the morning. Partied hard, closed the bars down. Yeah, I think about it all the time. It'd be fun to do it next year, which would be the 40th anniversary of the year I won it. Yeah, I would like to do it again someday. And probably next year might be the last chance I would have a chance to do it.
Why is that?
I'm not getting younger, and then I'm probably not going to get much healthier. I'm probably going to get more beat up as I go on, so it's a lifestyle.